Hello, I'm Dr. Rostenberg, and I want to personally thank you for checking out my YouTube channel. Stay tuned at the end of the video, and I will give my recipe for your healing process. Now, I wish we could achieve our results with just diet and lifestyle alone, but supplements really do make the difference. And to help you with that, you'll have an opportunity to order supplements at a discounted rate. We'll see you then.
Hey everyone, this is Dr. Rostenberg again from Beyond MTHFR, and I finally have some new content for you. I apologize for my absence, but 2017 has been a big year for us. We welcomed our third child into our family, so we've been we're fully outnumbered now. We have 3 kids, and there's 2 of us, so we're working hard on that. And the parents in the audience will understand how much time and attention those little people take when they're pretty young. And then the other thing that's exciting, that's been a distraction, but it's also been exciting, is I've completed a book. So we do have a Beyond MTHFR book coming out. The title is called Your Genius Body. I'm very excited to share that with you. I'm kind of teasing you with that now. In the next few weeks, by the end of the year, you should have a lot more information on that. And actually, it's updated on my website. If you go to beyondmthfr.com and click on the book tab, you will find some information about what's in that book. And we're really proud of it. I think the cover looks great, so I'm excited to get that out there. And stay tuned. I'll have a lot more information on that here over the next few weeks. But tonight's focus is on viruses. This is a topic that's absolutely important for anybody with chronic illness and dealing with the issues that we see in our practice: the chronic fatigue, the brain fog, the mental clarity issues, the hormone issues, the digestive issues. Just this functional medicine smorgasbord that we see with a lot of people with chronic illness. Viruses are a big player. So we're going to learn all about methylation, viruses, stress. It's going to be a great little chat here. Just as a refresher to some of the newer viewers, those of you that have been watching what I've been putting out over the last few years, this isn't new information, but I just want to share with you that you get your saliva tested via Ancestry DNA or 23andMe, and at this point in November 2017, I believe Ancestry DNA is your better option. It's less expensive, and the system that they're using to get the raw data is actually more useful when you generate your report. So 23andMe apparently has cut out some information from your genetic report that they used to have in it. Why they do that, I do not know. So Ancestry DNA still provides a lot of those SNPs that you're going to want to see when you upload your data to Sterling Hill's report. But really what I'm talking about here with methylation are these genes. There's the more well-known ones: MTHFR 677 and 1298. And just also a quick note, I cut and paste these, I pasted these different genes from several reports. So this isn't one individual who has, who's homozygous for 677 as well as heterozygous for 1298. As far as I've ever seen on my tests, I've received over about 500 at this point. I've never seen that. But point being, this is your test. These are the genes in question. People with these genes are going to tend to have compromised methylation cycle issues under certain situations, under chronic stress, poor nutrition, environmental exposures, that kind of thing. And the reason we're talking about methylation and viruses is that they're so intimately related. It's really a fascinating study. During the research for this, one of the things that came across our radar screen here was that 40% of our DNA is foreign parasitic DNA. It doesn't actually belong to us. I personally think that's a little gross, but hey, there's got to be a bigger plan, at play here in the universe. So there's a reason why our body allows this to happen. So 60% of our DNA is quote-unquote human, and 40% of it doesn't belong to us. It comes from viruses, which we know viruses are only able to replicate by putting their DNA inside of our DNA, and then our cells help do the replication of that virus. There's even a debate whether viruses are living things or not, and I think that's a fair question to ask. But basically, whether it's regardless of whether it's whatever kind of parasite it is, virus, bacteria, or something else, the research is very clear. It's effective silencing requires methylation. So methylation is the tool our body uses to get the viruses and the bacterial genes and even the cancer genes that we don't want to turn on to turn off. So this is another really just critical thing with methylation, is that it's involved in shutting genes off. And we need the genes to turn off just as much as we need genes to turn on, you know. Looking into the data here, this is actually just a couple months old. As I mentioned, everybody knows about viruses moving their DNA from, into our cells, but now there's just really hard data that bacteria do the same thing. It's called horizontal or lateral transfer, lateral genetic transfer. And basically the scientists figured out that these bacteria are they're releasing little globules off the sides of their bodies that contain DNA from the bacteria, and it can just get right inside of our cells and merge with our DNA and become part of ours. So that 40% of our genetic code that doesn't belong to us is coming from not just viruses but also bacteria through this mechanism. And it just says right here that these vesicles, little balls released by the bacteria, carry DNA into eukaryotic cells. Those are our kind of cells. And then they could find that bacterial DNA in the eukaryotic cell by testing it. So I mean, it's pretty good data here that this is happening. And what's so interesting about methylation is it just plays the central role in keeping this in order. So in other words, your methylation cycle is what's responsible for keeping you from having a viral infection at 42 that you had in 5th grade, because the virus DNA and even the bacteria DNA we now know is still inside of us. So we have our methylation cycle to thank for not having to deal with the chickenpox or shingles every year since we had it in 1st grade, for example. And I just think it's really interesting, the relationship there. So one of my favorite things about methylation, studying it, is that it intersects so many other topics, and it just is it's so fundamental to how our body works that it understanding these processes gives you insight into why certain people get sick, and that's what we're trying to figure out and ultimately prevent and reverse. So this study is here in front of you because just to prove that point, that methylation is required to silence the virus. So when you had, let's say, Epstein-Barr in 8th grade, 95% of humanity has Epstein-Barr. That virus was in a lytic phase. It was active. It caused your energy to go down. It really affected your cells. That's why they diagnose it as mononucleosis. But eventually your body kind of fights that off, and for all intents and purposes the infection is over. Well, what that means is that in the beginning, when it was infecting you, the virus is in what's called the lytic phase, and now when it's silent in your genes, just sitting in your body doing nothing, that's the latent phase. So that's what this study is talking about, latency. So DNA methylation is the only reason why viruses are able to become latent. They are shut off by methylation. They prove this by giving drugs to people that basically interfered with methylation and caused that system to break down, and it caused a potent reactivation of HIV. So if you interfere with methylation in someone with HIV, you reactivate the virus. And I'm sure if they redid this study with people with any kind of virus, the results would basically be the same. Methylation allows you to turn your viruses off. This is just a quick review of how that sort of gene silencing process works. Some of you may know this quite well, and others this may be a new concept. The unmethylated DNA is just the double helix. This is what we used to think was the most important thing, but now science knows it's not the instructions in the blueprint, it's how the blueprint is being read, right? And that's what the methyl groups do. So this is unmethylated. You can see the little C's here with little docking ports. There's no methyl group there. Then the body comes in and methylates that gene, and that begins the epigenetic programming. And then there's a little bit more that's done to it with the histones and everything. And that really shuts that gene off. Boom, that gene is not going to turn on. You're not going to get that cancer gene to turn on. You're not going to get that virus gene to turn on. That's pretty much shut off. And as long as that stays still, we're all good. And as you'll see in the next few slides, what happens is when we get under stress or when we have low methylation supply, which happens in a lot of cases when people with methylation genes, if your supply of methyl groups is compromised or your body's under a lot of stress or both, the DNA replicates again, and there's an incorrect transfer of these methyl groups, and all of a sudden these methyl groups sort of get knocked off, and that's when problem genes can turn back up. Okay, can be reactivated. And this is why we're trying to educate you guys so we can you can know about this and learn some ways to avoid this or heal from this. So I said I said earlier that chronic stress raises viral infection risk, and it's true. You're going to see some more data on your immune system here in a second, but basically they took this study. They took 276 volunteers, pretty nice sized study, and they just tried to determine, they exposed these people to the cold virus, and they tried to determine, who got it, what was different about the people who got sick from the cold virus and the people who just really didn't have any problem at all. What they determined in this study was that if you had had severe acute stress for like a month, maybe you were, I don't know, studying for a test, or you had someone got sick and broke their arm and it was stressful for 4 or 5 days, but they're healing great, and then that stress is behind you. That's not a big deal. It's the severe chronic stress, 1 month or longer, that was associated with a really greatly increased risk of getting the cold. So, financial stress, job stress, moving to a new town, a new baby, perhaps, a new relationship, the ending of a relationship. There's a lot of different things that stress our bodies out that last longer than a month. And these are the things that really cause us to get sick. So we know there's a stress component. So we're also looking at how viruses act, or how do our cells act, I should say, when we're under stress, and how does that lead to viral infections. This study's from 2011, and basically the opinion was that stress almost always seems to be a major factor leading to the stimulation of all the virus reactivation. It's a pretty strong statement. And the reason why is, as I showed you, the viruses they're in your DNA, they're asleep, they're latent, they're shut off, they've got methyl groups on top, they're just not doing anything. But when we're under stress, our body reacts into fight or flight. We physically do that as an organism, but even our cells do that at a cellular level. They go into fight or flight. And as part of that process, cells begin to replicate more. They read more DNA, they make more protein, they kick into gear. When the going gets tough, the tough get going, and your body starts to unzipper the DNA and start to make more stuff. Cells divide and proteins are made. We're trying to rally to the cause. The problem is that as we read DNA and open that DNA up to try to make more copies of stuff, there's more opportunity for those methyl groups to get knocked off the virus gene and for the virus to get remade. It's kind of like some residue in our DNA, and the more our DNA gets reproduced, the more likely it is that the virus gets reproduced as well. So we want to recognize that's one of the things that stress does. It's basically, stress is a major factor causing virus reactivation, and a large part of that is because it really causes cells to produce more protein and replicate faster, and that's a great opportunity for viruses to turn back on. Along the idea here with stress causing viral infections, this was a study that looked at cortisol levels, and this was only from last year, so there's some really good data coming out, and they basically said that cortisol production showed an association with infection risk. The higher the levels of cortisol, being at the greatest risk. So you might think that cortisol isn't all bad, I should say, right? Without cortisol, we literally cannot live, and I've made some videos on adrenal fatigue that some of you have probably seen, and those of you that haven't, you can check out. But definitely cortisol changes your immune system. This is the problem, is that cortisol's it's kind of like Goldilocks. We don't want to have too much. We certainly don't want to have too little. We want to be right in the middle. And that's our job when we work with patients, is to help them get there. So the reason this study is important is because of the next slide. So the next slide really makes sense of what you just saw. This is a study from 2012 showing the change in white blood cell distribution and function after being stressed out. So this is, this is an organism. I don't know if they did humans or rats. I actually just didn't double check that. But this is a mammal under stress who has an immune system that's pretty much identical to ours. And what they're measuring is, this is even after 2 hours of a really stressful experience. So you can see the white blood cell number went down 34% in 2 hours, 120 minutes. And we're just going to go across the board, just look at all this data. The monocytes went down 20%. The cytotoxic T cells, which, these are helping to clear infections, guys, they're down 30%. B cells that make, help you make antibodies, they're down 65%. The neutrophils, which are bacterial killing cells, they don't really kill viruses, they kill bacteria. They get increased 75%. But what really catches my eye from a clinical point of view, functional medicine and helping people get a better immune system, is this last column. And that's where you see the lymphocytes. And the lymphocytes are really critical for killing viruses. And they drop 45% in 2 hours. And then you have this other trigger right here, the natural killer cells. Natural killer cells are really tasked with killing viruses and cancer. My goodness gracious, we have a cancer problem in our society. And we also have chronic virus issues. Stress is the common denominator. So you'll see on your blood test that your lymphocytes, your neutrophilia, meaning your neutrophils, are really out of balance. They're too much, they're too high, and your lymphocytes are too low. If you see that on your blood test, what you're looking at is really the effects of cortisol. You're looking at stress changing your immune system. And what you can infer from that is as goes the lymphocytes, so goes your natural killer cells. So we really want to support in patients with chronic viruses. We want to make sure that their lymphocytes and their natural killer cells get a lot of good nutrition. I'm going to share with you a couple ideas on how to do that. Alright, without making this video too crazy long, I want to share with you some lab work that came back from a recent patient. This patient had this lab work done in another doctor's office probably within the last 18 months. 64-year-old female, chronic fatigue, inflammation, gut problems, just sort of just very, she's struggling. She has these chronic health issues. I was just going to say a very common presentation for this kind of people that we run into in helping optimize their genes and work with their methylation cycle. But what I'm sharing this with you is, maybe some of you out there have done a chronic viral test. They've tested you for herpes simplex type 1 or 2. They've looked at herpes virus type 6, cytomegalovirus, CMV, Epstein-Barr. There's a couple other viruses you could check for, but there's not 50 different viruses. There's really just going to be a handful that are the most important, and the ones on your screen right now are certainly the top of that list. And what bothers me about some of the way patients are treated is that you can see that her herpes simplex type 1 antibody is 25 and positive is 1.09. Okay, she's 25x above the upper limit. She's 9x above the upper limit on this next one. You can just go down the list. You can do your own math so you can see how this works. She's 600 on Epstein-Barr. It shouldn't be above 21. The doctors that did this test gave her zero information about the fact that she has an extremely widespread chronic virus. So I'm on my soapbox here for a second. Just bear with me. There is absolutely no way that an individual can do a blood test like this, looking at these antibodies, IgG, IgM. If there is no way you can do this test, and if the test comes back high like this, you can't tell the person it's an old virus. That's absolutely incorrect. What this means is they're actively fighting the virus, and they've got a virus that was once latent has reactivated because of the stress and the methylation issues I've just shared with you. So when people have this perfect storm of life stress, caring for a sick parent by yourself for a few years and trying to, stay married and be a parent yourself and pay your bills and all this stuff. The things that people do are very stressful, and we burn through our nutrition too fast. So as our methyl groups are depleted and our stresses increase, the opportunity shows up for these latent viruses, latent herpes type 1, latent herpes type 2, latent cytomegalovirus, latent Epstein-Barr. These viruses were in this woman's body decades ago. Something happened. They went from the latent phase back to the lytic phase. They got reactivated. So I just don't want you to get the second opinion from me. If you come back from your doctor and this is your blood test and your numbers are this high or even a fraction of this high, you have had a viral infection at least within the last 3 months, but very likely currently have one. And the reason I say that is the half-life of these antibodies, IgG and IgM. IgM I think is 8 to 9 days, and IgG is like 22 days, 25 days, okay? 5 half-lives and it's out of your body. So at most, if you have high viral antibodies like this patient does, you're looking at an active infection, because if you had an infection 4 months ago, then these would be 0. But because of the short lifespan, relatively short lifespan of these antibodies, in order for them to be this high today, it means they were made in a high quantity yesterday and the day before and the day before. And I hope that's not too confusing. I'm going to step off my soapbox now, but I just wanted to share this with everybody so that you can kind of see there's a lot of misunderstanding even in medicine about what this means. This means active infection happening now. There's a viral infection. You can't have high antibodies like this unless their body's pumping them out in high amounts every single day. And that only happens during an infection. So, now that I got that off my chest, then I'm going to finish up here. And this is just kind of harping on this idea today that not everything is a gut infection. I mean, I have made a lot of posts, and my book that's coming out is really focused on healing the gut. But certainly you can't, not everybody has a gut problem as their main issue. And it's important as a patient, it's important as a provider to remember that problems come in different shapes, colors, and sizes, just like people. So this is an organic acid test for somebody who has a lot of symptoms: chronic fatigue, brain fog, bloating, discomfort, just general malaise that would make sense to say, hey, you have a gut problem, cleanse your gut. But look at their test is almost like their gut is just the opposite of an infection. It's almost too sterile, and that's a whole nother area we might talk about someday. But this is clearly not a gut infection when we see an organic acid test like this. So if I see this test and I see these symptoms, the next place I might go is recommend them to do the chronic viral testing just to make sure. So now that we've talked about the problem a lot, I want to leave you with a couple different ideas for the solution. These are my favorite tools to help people be able to kill viruses better, okay? That's why we're going to talk about these. As I showed you before, one of the problems with this is that stress depletes your white blood cells, okay? And specifically, it depletes your lymphocytes, all right? Lymphocytes are required to kill viruses and cancer cells. This is two things that we need help with in our society. This study just proves, there's tons of data on this actually in PubMed, but this is one of my favorites, that really lymphocyte growth is dependent on the amount of glutamine that's around in the environment, in the plasma, in the muscle. So I'm a big fan of glutamine, and you can see them if you go to my webpage on Beyond MTHFR and look at the blog post associated with this video. I give you some recommendations, some ideas on how to dose this. It's not medical advice, but just sort of like, hey, this is what we do in our office. Use it at your own risk, but we like to use about 10 grams of this of glutamine powder 3 times a day consistently with patients who have chronic viral issues, because we want to make sure that the immune system gets enough raw material to do their job. And even back even back in the 90s, These findings suggest that increasing the plasma glutamine concentration above the normal physiological level is valuable in increasing the ability of lymphocytes to do their job, and that's really what we have to have. I mean, we have to have these white blood cells functioning to put the virus back inside of the box and let it go back to sleep again. Otherwise, we're going to waste all our energy fighting this virus for weeks and months and potentially years. Another one of my favorite tools that I think is really uniquely able to help with viral infections is Ganoderma. It's also known as reishi, but there's just something about this individual natural compound that has a very tonic effect on the white blood cells, especially the natural killer cells. So that's basically what this research shows. Natural killer cell and lymphocyte, activated killer cell activity was greatly increased. And whenever we can find something natural that's not a drug that enhances our immune system, we got to give that some time and attention. And this is just another study on the Ganoderma, kind of confirming that Ganoderma increases natural killer cell cytotoxicity. It increases the function of your immune system, and it's specifically the part of the immune system that's responsible for helping you put the virus back in the box. So aside from these two compounds, I also recommend, of course, methylation support. Oftentimes, though, occasionally patients show up who have never tried methylation support before, and that's kind of an easier situation to deal with. But a lot of times patients have tried B vitamins before, and maybe they didn't work, or they got a weird reaction to them, and that's when we really start to put our thinking hats on and start digging. But not everybody has a problem with B vitamins, but anybody who has signs and symptoms of a chronic virus, you can pretty much take it to the bank that they have a methylation issue going on at the same time. And by treating the immune system first to get it strengthened so it can get rid of the virus, making sure that they're methylating appropriately through their diet and supplementation is really just a smart strategy to help them prevent from having a virus come back like that ever again. So I hope that this video has been useful to you. I hope those of you out there who are wondering about viral infections and MTHFR, you found some value in this. And like I said, thanks for checking out my channel and keeping me busy in practice, helping people like you get better. I appreciate that. And stay tuned for the book. We're excited. The name of the book is Your Genius Body. And like I said, go to Beyond MTHFR, click on the book tab, and you can read a little bit about what that is going to be all about. Stay tuned. We're going to have some announcements coming up shortly. Otherwise, everyone, have a great night. Thanks for your time and attention.
Thank you so much for watching this video and sharing it with your friends and family. I personally believe, as I'm sure you do as well, that educating ourselves about what it truly means to be healthy is the only way we're going to change healthcare. I have created a website as a resource for you. To take advantage of this information, navigate to www.beyondmthfr.com and take a look around. In addition to blogs and articles I have written, you will find a tab on the menu labeled Protocols. It is a growing list of tools that I use in my office to help support my patients. You will find background information on common health conditions, you will find a detailed supplement protocol, and you will find dietary advice to support the body's natural healing process. You will also have access to order recommended supplements at a discounted rate and have them shipped to your front door. I'm giving you the tools that I use in practice every day to help you overcome health challenges and live a happier, healthier life. I have done my best to give you that information, and you will find it on these protocol pages. If you are looking for more help than simply what supplements should you take or what diet should you follow, I'm inviting you to come to Boise and see me. Let me and my team and my staff take care of you. We have patients coming from all over the country and all over the area on a regular basis, and there's room for you too. Now, if coming all this way to Boise is too big of a commitment, then please pick up the phone or email my office. We can work together from a distance.